Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dozer, and if you're new to the show, the mission here is to expose the quacks and gimmicks in the marketing industry while featuring some great marketers and entrepreneurs along the way. So in this episode, I'm excited to welcome back our guest, Audrey Boyce. Audrey is the VP or Vice President of Public Relations here at Empathy First Media. Audrey, thanks so much for joining the show once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. So this episode, I really want to talk about 5 red flags to look for in PR agencies. Some of these topics, we kind of talk behind the scenes about these all the time, so it's fun to dive in a little further. But before we do that, Audrey, why don't you explain kind of what you do at Empathy First Media as the VP of PR?
Sure. So I onboard all the clients. I'm the one behind the strategy, and then I also help our team execute that strategy just to make sure every client is successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about some of the biggest wins that you have and talk about what industries you work with as well.
Sure, we work with all industries, but my bread and butter is healthcare, being a nurse. So some of my biggest ones personally are Newsweek, Medical News Today, Medscape, Forbes Health, Women's Health, Men's Health. Those are some of the big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done very well so far, just as a testament here. You've had some big placements, some big backlinks, some big media mentions, brand mentions, stuff of that nature, reaping all the benefits of effective digital PR. So you're very good at what you do. So let's dive into these red flags to look for in PR agencies. There's a lot of gimmicky PR agencies out there. So red flag number 1, in my opinion, I'll start this off here, is questionable ethics and guaranteed placement. So Audrey, talk about guaranteed media placements when a PR agency, is talking to a potential client and they guarantee a high opportunity media placement. Talk about why that's a red flag.
Yeah, so a lot of these PR agencies will put social media ads and they'll say, oh, guaranteed in Forbes or guaranteed in Fortune. Usually, when that happens, one of two things are true. They're paying for the placement or they want to lock you into a contract. And once they lock you in, they're just going to hope that that publicist or that account executive, whoever's handling the account, will deliver. So usually I say if any agency is guaranteeing anything, it's not the right one and keep looking.
Yeah, and I see this all the time. I get ads for a Forbes magazine and they say like your name could be here or your business could be here, or Forbes Business Council is another gimmicky one I know I've come across before. So it's really important to, anytime you hear guaranteed media placements, to just, that's a huge red flag and I would run away if it were me.
Absolutely. Usually they're charging you for just paying for the media and they're reaping all the benefits.
Yep, absolutely. And the client has no idea how it works behind the scenes. So, all right, let's
Absolutely.
move on to the second red flag here of not setting boundaries and expectations with clients from day one. So, Audrey, explain this one a little bit.
Yeah, so the biggest thing I always, you've probably heard me say this 1,000 times to clients, is it's just not going to happen overnight. It's not a quick fix, but we can get there. So always setting expectations about timeline. It's not going to, you might start to see results in the first month, but I always usually say give us 1 to 3 months to kind of prove ourselves and get your media credibility built. It's also important to set expectations with your client about what to expect. What do these opportunities look like? What is the time commitment? How are we going to communicate with you? That way they're set up to succeed and your team is set up to succeed as well.
Yeah, one thing I've seen that happens a lot is we have potential clients hop on these discovery calls with our team and they'll say, well, I saw you got so and so in Forbes, or I saw you got so and so in this insert big media placement in a given industry. How do I do that? How do I do that in a month, next week, etc.? But they don't realize the amount of work it takes to build up media credibility. So I guess explain a little further for the audience the importance of like what it takes to build up that media credibility and why you should never just dismiss some of these smaller opportunities.
Sure. So it's kind of like stepping stones. We start with maybe a small blog in your industry, and then we move up to a bigger publication, and then we kind of stair step up to things like Forbes, Wall Street Journal. If you think about it from our perspective, we can't convince a journalist to write about you if you're nowhere online, if you have no online presence. So the purpose of us giving you these small opportunities is so that way we can go back to other journalists and say, hey, look at the awesome commentary they gave to this outlet. And then we kind of build you up from there. So it helps you, like your online presence, but it also helps us build you up to higher outlets and they can see what you have to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Media credibility is very important when you start getting into PR. So let's move on to the third red flag here of poor communication. So, Audrey, I don't know if you have specific examples of what this would look like, but talk about why poor communication is a giant red flag when kind of figuring out which PR agency to work with.
The biggest thing that comes to my mind is if you get on a call with an agency and the person that is not going to be handling your account is not on that call, that's a massive red flag because you don't know if you're going to mesh well with that person and you don't know if you're going to vibe, right? So you probably know we always have the team on because depending on who's going to be handling that account, we need to make sure you guys work well together. So for communication purposes, if I tell a client it's only going to be maybe, let's say, an hour, hour and a half a week, but this person completely kills it out of the gate and it takes 8 hours a week, you're not setting proper expectations and you're not setting the communication timeline. So make sure when you're interviewing per se an agency that they're good, they're responsive, and if they're responsive, their team is probably responsive.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind for me when I hear poor communication in PR is it can fall a lot on the client side too. Sometimes clients that go into PR for the first time and are just misled by these big agencies, they don't understand that if there's an opportunity due and they don't tell you until the last minute, well that tarnishes your PR person's reputation with reporters and then that can blacklist you from stories down the line. So I guess elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure. So I think I always tell clients if you can't do an opportunity, we don't expect you to be available 24/7. Sometimes these opportunities come at 8 o'clock at night or on the weekends. But if you don't tell us till 5 minutes before, essentially that reporter may not have a backup and then they don't have an expert for their story. So a lot of times these reporters are holding spots for specific clients in specific industries based on their expertise, and we have to make sure we deliver. That ultimately means they will probably never come back to you, and they will also maybe not come back to us as the PR professional.
Yeah, that's very important. I just wanted to call that out quick. Red flag number 4, let's move on here, is inadequate preparation for crisis management. So, talk about crisis management when it comes to PR, Audrey, just for listeners who may not really understand what that means in the world of PR.
Yeah, so a lot of people get, when they're looking at packages for PR, they get reputation management and crisis management confused. Reputation management is part of any PR campaign. We're always looking to build your reputation online. And crisis management is when something happens and we have to react. Sometimes that looks like we're issuing a statement on your behalf. Sometimes that looks like maybe we're just trying to get positive press, more positive press than we already have been, to kind of bury it per se on Google. It really depends on the situation, but it's better to be reactive in that situation and have a plan with your PR team about what happens if certain situations happen. You don't want to get in that moment and not have a plan.
Yeah, and most people are don't have a plan, right? When something bad happens in terms of a hit piece or just, bad news about a certain brand or an author or whatever the case is, most people have zero crisis management plan in place.
Because they believe in their brand so strongly, they usually say it won't happen to me, but it really can happen to anyone. I've had clients where maybe it's something small or maybe it's huge and we need to really intervene. But having that conversation proactively with your PR team is huge and making sure they have a plan on your behalf.
Yeah, so talk about, like, let's say if there's a hit piece, for example. I've seen this happen to one of our clients before. Talk about what a best strategy is if there's a hit piece to kind of cover that up on Google, whether it's search, news, whatever. What's your process there?
Yeah, so it's kind of depends on where the client is at in their media journey. If they already have a lot of positive press, the way I look at that, okay, if someone searches them, they may see one negative to 50 positive. But if the client is just starting out, that may severely tarnish their media credibility, and reporters may see that when they're looking into them to see if they want their story. So usually my strategy is if they have good media credibility, we kind of sit back and we don't do a lot other than we continue doing the positive media credibility. We keep building you up in different outlets in your industry. If they don't have a lot of media credibility, usually that's when I talk about do we need to release a statement depending on what it happens. I'm kind of coming from a healthcare standpoint on that one, but it kind of just depends on that one. It depends on where they're at.
Yeah, a lot of times you'll see big companies release a statement when something big happens. I know Boeing's kind of a recent example where they've had all these
Exactly.
issues.
Yep.
What would you do if you were in the situation of Boeing leading their PR team? What's like maybe one or two things that you would do in this situation?
I think that you have to look at it from the public standpoint and not your own, right? You might believe in your brand, you might believe in your company, but now people don't believe in your brand or your company. So In my opinion, them releasing a statement, taking ownership is a big one in PR. If you release a statement and you take ownership, people respect you a lot more. So usually I say to clients or in that situation, take ownership for what happened and promise and deliver to change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice too. Let's move on to the fifth and final red flag here to look for in PR agencies, and that would be having no industry knowledge. So, talk about why it's important to work with a PR professional who has industry knowledge on a particular topic.
Yeah, so coming from someone who's been in healthcare a long time, I can talk shop with my healthcare clients and they trust me more because they know that I know that industry. Or if you've been in finance previously or real estate, if you know the verbiage, they just trust you a little bit more. And they also know that you're going to know how to message their brand a little bit better than someone who doesn't have experience. This specifically goes for healthcare because things, as you know, can go really wrong really fast, and you have to know how to position someone to the public without making a severe mistake on their behalf.
And that's one thing I see all the time with big PR agencies is that they're just a shotgun of all industries, all niches, trying to have every single client come on board. And these people are PR professionals. They're not necessarily industry subject matter experts. So that's what I
Yep.
think separates you and a couple other members of our PR team is that we actually have subject matter experts on healthcare, on finance, on even cryptocurrency is another one that we have someone focusing on too. So that's very important that you call that out. So the other thing I want to talk about too is AI when it comes to PR. So AI is obviously consistently growing in the field of PR. But in your opinion, Audrey, is it a red flag to use AI in either PR pitches or responses?
So this is an interesting question because people would probably have different answers. AI is the new shiny toy, right? It's everyone's using it, everyone's adapting it, but in PR it may not be a good thing. And this is why. If you write a pitch and you don't personalize it to that journalist, chances are they're never even going to open it or they're not going to get past the first sentence. So it's really important to maybe use it for ideation, but nothing farther than that. Don't copy and paste a pitch off ChatGPT. It's a very quick way to get blacklisted. On the client side, I never recommend using ChatGPT other than ideation. Don't take any actual information from it because truthfully it's not yours, and we want to make sure one, we're not getting blacklisted, you're not getting blacklisted as the client, as well as we want to make sure that those thoughts and those industry specific topics that you're talking about are coming from you in case we have to repurpose them for another opportunity in the future.
Yeah, so it should be known that if you're a client using AI 100%, there are AI content detectors that these reporters are using to flag ChatGPT and other AI generated content. So I completely agree with you. And what I've seen too is like there's tools that are completely banning AI altogether, where if you use AI in a pitch, there's no second chance. They're just going to ban your account. So
Yep.
it's AI is a pretty big red flag in my opinion when it comes to how these PR agencies look at it. So any final notes, Audrey, on just PR for anyone listening and some other maybe red flags for people to avoid?
I would just say the biggest piece of advice I have is interview your agency that you're looking at and do not stop at one because they are all so different. Find a team that's going to have an honest and transparent conversation with you about what your PR campaign is going to look like. If they're willing to have that conversation, they're willing to talk about the hard stuff, they're willing to talk about timeline and communication and things they need from you, usually you will be successful.
Yeah, that's great advice. So where can people find you online for more tips and tricks on PR?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I talk about a lot of things in PR. I kind of call out some of those red flags as well as some tips and tricks getting into your first PR campaign.
Yeah, so if you want to learn more about digital PR or just best practices in PR in general, be sure to follow Audrey on LinkedIn. I'll leave a link to that in the description, whatever platform you're listening to. And thanks again for everyone listening to this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. Be sure to tune in again for the next episode.